Welcome to Cradle and All, a podcast hosted by sisters Renita and Christine to educate, inspire, and connect with other mothers. Every other week, listen as we discuss topics related to pregnancy, raising children, and balancing motherhood with other aspects of womanhood. Whether you're relaxing, juggling tasks, or even breast pumping, join us as we figure it out together.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cradle and All.
Welcome back, you guys.
Today, we are talking all about cradle and sleep with infants and with newborns. And this is something that we are living right now because we have little ones that are less than a year old. And so their sleep experience is very fresh on our minds. As we're recording this, it is about 8:30 p.m. So we have just gone through the nighttime routine. And so it is like, in full effect in our houses.
Yes, it feels so good when these children are asleep and it's like, check, done, I'm free.
Right. I always tell my husband, I'm like, this is my favorite time of the day when I finally get some time to myself. And I feel so accomplished after they go to bed. I'm like, oh, yes, I did it. Finally. Not even finally, but like I did it.
I feel like I'm on countdown mode. Once I see it hits a certain time, it's like, okay, here we go with the marathon of bedtime, especially now with two. And so once it's done, I feel like somebody needs to tuck me in.
Right. You're so right. I feel like I should be rewarded after they go to bed, which I usually do with a drink. So that's my reward.
I have my wine right here.
Right. And I have a beer. So we do reward ourselves. But, when we think about newborn and infant sleep, there's so many stories to be told. Yes. And you were telling me one a little earlier about Jackson.
Oh my gosh. So I always think about the day Bryson and I learned about the double swaddle. Like, it is so clutch. So there was a night, I think Jackson was he must have been like somewhere between 5 to 6 weeks old, enough where he was like not fresh out the womb, but like he was learning to move around a little bit more. And we were normally swaddling him with those swaddle wraps. This night, he would not go to sleep for anything. We were putting him in the bassinet and then taking turns and rocking him, because every time you laid him down when you thought he was just finally asleep, he would wake right back up screaming, crying. We tried sound machines, the pacifier, we took him to the car for a little drive. Nothing was working, to the point that we were like, this child hates our bassinet. He hates us. So I am on Amazon looking up different types of bassinets and sleepers. I was prepared to order a snoo overnight, like whatever I could. Meanwhile, Bryson is on YouTube looking up tips, and he finds this thing called the double swaddle. And so the double swaddle is where there's 2 layers of swaddle. The first one tucks their arms into the side, almost like a burrito would. Like literally you're tucked to the side so that the arms cannot pop out of that swaddle at all. And then the second swaddle is just your standard swaddle. So once we got him down with that double swaddle, we practiced both of us to make sure we can get it. Mm-hmm. He was nice and cozy and he never woke again. So we have been using the double swaddle technique for our early newborn babies since then. Like that thing can do no wrong to me, the double swaddle.
And that worked for Jackson, the double swaddle. I remember you telling me about it, and I thought it was like inhumane that you guys would strap him down so securely just to sleep. I mean, he was in there tight because he used to break free, and he was
so strong. Yeah, that thing, it could hold in the strongest of babies.
Well, what's so funny is that what works for one may not work for others, because we tried it after you told me about it. And for one, I couldn't even master the wrap. So we couldn't do it for that reason alone, because I didn't know how to wrap him up twice in a double swaddle. But like, I also don't know if that would have worked for Dallas, because what I'm learning now as having 2 boys and just 2 kids is that what worked for one may not, and actually is not working for the other at all.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, I know you went through it with sleep.
Yeah. I mean, so much so that I even started like going to to classes online to learn about sleep with my second. And I knew what to do. But with the second child, I was like, okay, I need to learn, I guess. But, let's start with techniques, because you talked about the double swaddle. Mm-hmm. When you think about the newborn phase, let's start with newborn. What other techniques did you use to put the newborns to sleep?
So before we had Jackson, Bryson was so excited to come home one day with this video, like literally a DVD. We had to pull out an old DVD player to watch it. And the guy who came up with the SNU, this doctor, I forgot his name, Dr. Harvey or something, he came out with this video about the 4 S's. And so we had implemented this technique because we read about it before we had Jackson. And we actually still use it with Russell. Mm-hmm. So it was like shushing, sucking, like with the pacifier or the breast, swaddling, which we did, as you know, with the double swaddle. And, oh my goodness, what's the last one?
Suck and shake.
And shaking, so like a little rocking kind of feeling. And so those are the kind of the techniques that we tried when putting him to sleep. Like we would be shushing in his ear. We didn't have a sound machine with Jackson, but we ended up getting one with Russell. But like the shushing technique and the swaddle for every sleep thing before he started daycare, he had that swaddle. And he used a pacifier too, but I also was nursing him. So I felt like once we got in the routine of using those things, he got that. My hope was that he would get the hang of that. And sometimes it would work and sometimes it didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, we use those techniques also. And you gave us a copy of that DVD because y'all had an extra copy. And so with our first one, we watched it. It was a very short video. And it was Dr. Harvey Karp, who is the founder of the SNU and I guess the Happiest Baby also. And he has these 5 techniques. And we're not endorsing him or anything, but these techniques, I found success with some of them, especially when the babies are newer. So when they're like in the 4th trimester, which is I think up to
3 months.
Oh, okay, 3 months.
Yeah,
9 months. But especially with the shushing, that was one that we found success with in the first 3 months. Not so much later on, but the sound machine was one that we also used outside of the 5 S's. But with swaddling, both of my kids loved that. But what I realized lately is with my oldest kid, Dakota, we were swaddling him or putting him in a sleep sack. But I actually realized he doesn't like that. He's been sleeping so much more soundly now without the sleep sack. And I realized, I think it's because he wants to like tuck his body up. He wants to control his movement, and the sleep sack, I think, was restricting him. But that's another thing that we use with our oldest son and tried with Dakota, but it did not work. But the swaddle is one that I will say does work for my kids when they were younger.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting that you said like the 4th trimester and up until 3 months, because I really do think there's a difference in how kids sleep after like 3 to 4 months. So I think let's talk a little bit about the difference here, or like let's start in the beginning of the first 1 to 3 months and then how things are afterwards. For example, with the shushing technique and, the S's we talked about, one thing that I know that you really don't do now is the sucking part, I guess, with a pacifier. Mm-hmm. I mean, you nurse, but my kids, they love their pacifier, and now Russell has thumb. So like what techniques do you use, or sleep aids, things like that?
Yeah, that, like I said, it's different for each child. We tried the pacifier from the very beginning with Dakota, and he refused it all the way from the very first day of life. He refused it and then never got to it. But he really loves sucking in the form of nursing. So that was one that I'd say varied between the two. But we definitely tried all the S's and then stuck with the ones that worked, which was the swaddle, suck, and shush. And I feel like the shush could also be interchangeable with white noise. Mm-hmm. And so we use that like religiously from the very beginning with both of my boys. Is we use a sound machine. And what's interesting is that when I attended the sleep class through, I can't think of the name of the organization, but I can include it in the show notes. But when I attended this class, it's Baby Spark is what it's called. They have free class. Actually, I even paid for this thing. That's how desperate I was. I paid for this class and it really didn't help. But I did learn about the different types of noise. That there's white noise, pink noise, gray noise.
Oh, wow.
And that for different stages of infancy and newborns, that different frequency of sounds are actually better for different age groups. So for a younger infant, they should listen to pink noise. And as they get older, there's a different frequency. Like the gray noise is better for toddlers. And
How do
so
you know which noise is which?
you can go online and you can like get a frequency reader, and there's all you can to tell you what the sound is, but then there's also different categories of sound just based on what the sound is. So,
Yeah.
the typical sounds are white noise, shushing, outdoors noises, ocean sounds. And what was interesting is that usually I go to ocean sounds as my go-to for the kids, but it said that ocean sounds actually is not the best for infants and newborns, that that's not a pink noise. It's a different frequency. So I did learn a lot about that, like noises, because I do like the noises for kids when they're going to sleep. I still put it on even for Dallas, who's about to be 3 in 2 weeks, but now he listened to lullabies. And so I do love the sounds to encourage them to go to sleep. So that's one technique that I really love. And another sleep aid for me would be scents. So I talked in
I
another
never
episode.
thought about.
Yeah. So I actually don't, I know that a lot of mothers really swear by this and using just like the sounds, like using different scents to spur sleep. Like, of course, with lavender, you probably notice that a lot of lotions have lavender scent because it's supposed to encourage sleep. So with our scent diffuser that we use in the hospital, we then use it in the room for the baby. And so I have
really
a lot of
good.
so a lot of different essential oils. So I have my little routine at night where we put on the noise machine, we have the scents, and then of course the other routine. But as far as the sleep aid, I would consider the scent to be a technique or a sleep aid, because in my mind, I feel like it does kind of assist with signaling to him that it's time for sleep.
Yeah, yeah. Now, with the sound machine, I actually did not use one with Jackson because I felt like if he needs sound to sleep, a certain sound, then it may hurt us if we ever go on vacation or he spends the night at somebody's house, and then he would be like used to it. So we actually never used a sound machine or anything like that with Jackson. Now that we have Russell, we actually did start using a sound machine because I'd seen you using it.
Yeah.
And he got hooked to it. So there was like a little sound machine I had that always went off after 15 minutes. And so when he was first home with us and like home from the NICU and the sound machine would go off, he would wake up right away. And we'd be like, oh my God, run upstairs and turn it back on. And we would be like going crazy trying to get this thing on before he woke up. Until finally we were like, duh, just get a longer sound machine. Yes. So now we have the Hatch. But it's so interesting.
Yeah. And that's another thing I learned in that class is about the sound that is emitted from the different products, that you want to actually use a product that is made for sound, not something like a clock or a monitor or the camera rather, because that is not going to be the true sound. It's going to probably be a little altered because it's not an actual speaker. And so the Hatch is probably one of the best products you can use for sound because it's made for, I think that's one of the primary reasons it's created is light and sound.
He loves his little Hatch machine. Yeah. Now, it's so interesting that you said, with the scents and the sound machine, you have your routine set. So thinking back to the first 6 weeks after delivery, like in that prime maternity leave kind of time, what did your routine look like then?
Oh man, I was so reliant. I even still am so reliant on routines because as a former educator, I know that young people, children, and even adults really thrive on routine. And so even all the research, the Google searching I did back then and the Pinterest schedules were really like showing you, you need to get a schedule and you can start it as early as like 6 weeks or
I forgot about those Pinterest schedules. I was like religious with it.
Me too. And what's funny is like every schedule always was kind of the same kind of cadence to it. But I didn't really start a schedule until after 6 weeks. I know you said the first 6 weeks, but for the first 6 weeks, you're more so on their schedule as far as like I was on their feeding schedule. You're just going based off their feeding schedule because they can be cluster feeding. They can be having some sleep regression or sleeping too much. Mainly in the first 6 weeks, it's all about feeding. So for me, the sleep was making sure that they don't sleep too much. That was always the biggest thing, especially with my second. I remember like, oh my gosh, he's sleeping so much at first, which you don't want because then they won't sleep at night. So it was a matter of making sure they got up every 3 hours, every a number of hours to feed. So that was more so the sleep schedule was feeding around the sleeping schedule.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't you agree?
I completely agree. Honestly, in the first few weeks, it might have been way more than 6 weeks. With Jackson, I literally got anxiety when it got dark outside. It was like, oh my God, it's getting late. We're going to be up all night. I don't know what to expect. I would be so panicked about, like, each night I just was so stressed. I did not feel like that with Russell, but something about like, okay, it's going to be waking up a lot. I don't know what to expect. And eventually when the routines came along and I knew what times we'd be waking up, that was a little different. But I really was stressed in the first few weeks about sleep. Now, in those few weeks, like a lot of parents, we have our kids in a bassinet with us in the room. And so that anxiety was never feeling like I had a chance to relax and just have downtime because I had to be quiet when those hours came and I couldn't just lay in my room with the light on. So that's a little bit what it was like.
Yeah.
And wondering,
Oh
like,
my
is he
gosh.
breathing as I look over in the bassinet?
I'm not enjoying even remembering that. I think I forgot. You know, it's easy to forget those horrific moments because, like, yeah, the nighttime was so stressful because as the sun sets, you know that the night is going to be, for me, it was like, what is tonight going to be? Will he sleep longer? What will work? It was like every single night or every morning after the evening, my husband and I would like debrief and say, all right, so how did it go last night? What went well? We literally would be recapping the night and setting a plan. At least I would be like, let's set a plan for tonight. And I would also be Google searching in the middle of the night while I was up, like, okay, so how to get a baby to sleep? What do I need to do? Okay, get rid of the red light. Like every day it was reflection and setting a game plan because every night was just so different. And I wanted it to be successful, but every night was not successful. It just wasn't.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you're better than me with that whole plan thing. I feel like Bryson and I were really good about taking turns. It was always like, your turn, your turn. And then, like, it would just be one of those things where the baby starts crying and both people stay still and, like, doesn't say a word, be like, who's going to move first? Who's going to move first? Who's going to do it? Then be, like, half asleep, arguing, like, no, I just did it. No, I just did it. You were sleeping. You don't know. So it was like that in the beginning.
Oh my gosh. It's still like that for us. You get quiet and you're like, I mean, even just the other night, we still have the monitor. So I like put the monitor closer to his head. Even though I'm up, I'm like, okay, he needs to hear this and get up because I feel like the alarm clock. I hear everything.
Oh my gosh.
He needs to go get this one.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And then even like when you do go in their room to wake them up, then it's a debate of like, okay, so now that I'm in here, do I change their diaper? How much do I ruffle them around? Do I unswaddle?
I forgot about that. No, that's a good question. That's a good thought. Like back when we were in this stage, I would, if they had a dirty diaper, wake them up. But if it was a wet, I just let them sleep through. Back like once they were in a routine, in a set routine, so they didn't wake up too much.
Same.
Yeah.
Yep, I did too because they tell you. The research shows, I guess, or not the research, but what I read out there is like you want to keep them you want to prevent them from waking up. And so that might mean not changing their diaper, giving them, not turning on the overhead light, just leave as little movement as possible, not stirring them. So yeah, we definitely did that as well because once they're asleep, you want them to stay asleep, even if they're in your room.
Yeah.
What's so funny is like at nighttime, I felt like, especially with Dakota, that he could sleep through an earthquake during the day. But at night, the tiniest noise, any little ruffle would wake him up.
Oh my goodness. That's just how it goes sometimes. But you know what's interesting? I mentioned before that we have a bassinet that we use for both of our kids. But Jackson really did not like the bassinet. So we had Jackson in the age of the rock and play, which we never used. I know you used it. But we had got the Halo bassinet, so excited for it, and he hated it from the beginning. So we actually used a co-sleeper for him for the first few months. And so it was a travel co-sleeper that you use if you go places, but he was just in the middle of it, his own little container. We couldn't roll over on him or anything like that, but he was right between us in the bed with me and Bryson. So, and we have a king size bed, and we did that. I know people say you shouldn't co-sleep, and that's actually the reality that we that we did.
Well, that worked for y'all. And I know with the co-sleeper, we also tried that. So we got every different sleep mechanism. We got a dock-a-tot, a co-sleeper, a rock and play, a bassinet, a pack and play. Like we literally had everything. And we even got this for Dallas, we used the rock and play. I mean, we were on a strict budget. We were like, we can't even afford a pack and play. We couldn't afford a lot. So we got the rock and play and he absolutely loved it. Of course, now I think it's not even called a sleeper. It's I don't even know what it is, but you shouldn't put your child to sleep in there. But he loved that. But for Dakota, we tried the co-sleeper. That did not work for him at all. He just didn't really sleep well in there. We tried the bassinet, which we got the, oh goodness, what is it called? It's this fancy bassinet that moves. It's not the snoo, but it moves and it has all these noises. It can move as a car, like the bassinets in a car. It can move like a rocker. Like there's 5 different settings and noises. It's a Bluetooth enabled on your phone. Like it was this fancy one that we're like, okay, this is going to work. Of course, it didn't work. I mean, we tried it and it did not work for him. So you said y'all shouldn't co-sleep, but we did the thing that they say you really should never do. And the baby was in the bed with us for the first 6 months. Like we really tried.
Oh my gosh, 6 months? I didn't realize it was that long.
we weren't like, it wasn't our go-to every night. Every night we tried one of the sleeping contraptions. We tried the co-sleeper, we tried the bassinet. And usually that worked until like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. And every night he'd wake up and we'd try. And then finally we just gave in. We always put him down in the proper sleep area. But then when it's the middle of the night and we're not sleeping, we just knew like, okay, he's going to sleep soundly in our bed. And so we always had him in the bed with us until finally we went to the pediatrician and we felt guilty. We're like, okay, we're going to try better. And we had to really buckle down because it was hard. It was hard because we couldn't sleep. Like we could sleep so soundly with him in our bed and we know it's wrong. And I don't actually advocate for that because it is dangerous because if you roll over, he can be, the sheets, everything's a danger when they're in the bed with you, no matter how safely they sleep, it's dangerous. And so I don't advise that. For us, we had to put a solid week's worth of effort to get him in a crib. And then it worked. It's still not perfect, but at least we knew that he could sleep for longer stretches after we put that effort in to get him out of the bed with us.
Yeah, it can definitely be hard. I mean, it is not easy when it comes to sleep. Even for the people whose kids don't have much of a struggle, there's always these moments that can be pretty tough. Mm-hmm. Yes, you guys always want to keep in mind the risk of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. So co-sleeping is not recommended at all. You want to make sure you put your baby down on their back. But it's also good to talk about the realities of what a lot of people go through. And so it's good to just be real when talking about it. Mm-hmm. Now, once we got the kids in the crib, I always feel like our kids sleep better in the crib, but it's so hard to get them in there. I never want them to leave the room with us. So we started introducing Russell to the crib during naps. Usually we were swaddling it first, but then around 4 months is when we introduced Jackson, and maybe more like 5 months for Russell, where we started letting him sleep in there for his naps, and then still swaddled. And so one night he was getting a late nap. It was like getting close to bedtime and he still hadn't woken up. And Bryson was like, well, let's just let him sleep. He's tired. And then we were ready for bed. He was still sleeping. And Bryson's like, well, he's sleeping. Just let him sleep. And next thing you know, that's where he was the rest of the night. Even when he woke up, we just left him in there and we never went back. It was like taking a Band-Aid off. He tricked me, but it was probably for the best.
That sounds so easy. I wish. Like with Russell, I feel like y'all had the easiest transition experience.
I think some of that was because he was from the NICU. So being in the NICU for 5 weeks, or even for babies who are there less, they are on a schedule. It's like every 3 hours he was eating, sleeping, like a lot of people do, but it's not a joke in the NICU. It's literally like that. And then they don't have their parents holding them all day long. Unfortunately, the nurses are wonderful, but he's in his crib alone. So when he came home from the hospital, he was just still on that schedule. And it has persisted ever since.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, So you said you did it around like 5 or 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it was hard. Like I actually am like, you know what? By the time they're 3 months, they have to be out of our room because I love sleeping. Like that's one of the things I miss most about my pre-mother life is all the sleep I used to get. So I'm like, they need to go because I need to sleep. So like, but by 3 months, I start like a little bit before 3 months. I start like a week before preparing, which means the naps, like you said, transitioning during naps, getting them to sleep in there longer and longer, swaddling in their room during the crib. And I also still do the sleep aids in there as well during the daytime, which would be I keep the blinds open so that there's sunlight that they're exposed to, where they can helping them differentiate between day and night. Since at that age they still don't know the difference between day and night, so keeping the light coming in during the nap, um, setting a schedule to where they're not sleeping longer than 90 minutes. I was very strict about that, making sure that I set my clock to where they're waking up every 90 minutes, even if I have to wake them up. I'm not letting them sleep longer because I want them to sleep longer at night, and also to get the sense that daytime you don't sleep for long stretches, you sleep for a short little burst, and it also can be noisy and bright. So making sure they have all that stimulus and the light and the short sleep burst, but the swaddle to help them at night. So doing that transition about a week before we start the nighttime, and then getting them to start in their crib right at 3 months, right about, because usually around that time I have to go back to work, so I really do need that sleep. And so with both of my boys, with Dallas, I feel like it was so much easier for him for some reason. It really was. He took to it very quickly and he was able to sleep throughout the night in his crib much sooner. Whereas Dakota, he's still like he's 8 months now. He's still waking up frequently throughout the night. So 2 nights ago, he woke up 3 times. One, three, and
Oh
5.
my goodness. But what's so interesting though, every baby is so different, as you say, but because our kids grow up together, I feel like you have a harder time with sleep than my kids, even though I don't feel like I'm doing that much different than you. But one thing I
Mm-hmm.
will say, just like you're like, when it's 3 months, I want them in the crib, Bryson and I are very strict about no kids sleeping in the bed with us
Mm-hmm.
at all, like once they're out of the bassinet stage. So we are like, when it's bedtime, and you have to learn to sleep in your bed on your own. And I think that plays a role in how we kind of sleep train. And we put more of our effort into not transitioning into the crib, like that kind of happened haphazardly, but more effort about sleep training. So when we did sleep training,
Oh.
I remember researching different methods, and we did a cry it out method with both of the kids. Do you remember if you did a method?
Yeah. Cried out with Dallas more strictly. But yeah, that's funny. That's interesting you say that you focus more on the sleep training than actually the transition to the crib. Because I feel like they
Yeah.
probably should go hand in hand. But what's so interesting to me is that a lot of the parents I talk to, or even like family members with young kids, they don't really focus on sleeping that much. Like I find that I'm kind of the outlier of my peers of moms with young kids that are like so strict about sleep.
Yes, you
Um,
are. I've seen you be like, Mom, it's 90 minutes. Time to wake up from this nap. Wake the baby up.
I wonder why you think that. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I always think it's interesting that you are so strict about daytime sleep compared to
Well,
my
not
strictness
me.
about nighttime.
Oh, you think you're? I feel like you're not as strict about night anymore. Because like
Because
today,
my kids sleep.
I saw Jackson the other day, and it was 8 o'clock, and he was not in bed.
Once they got their sleep routine down, I'm like, okay, good. You know what to do. You know the rules. But for example, in the sleep it out phase, when I was training Jackson more so because he didn't have the routine like Russell, it was a week that was horrible. Like I would be outside the door like, Bryson, we should go in there. And Bryson's like, no. And then vice versa. The next day, he's the one like, no, let's go in. And it was a week of horror because we felt so bad and Jackson's crying. But we're like, we have to get through this week. And I mean, for some people, it's more than a week, but it happened to just be a week for us.
It's
But I feel
really.
like we put that was the only time I ever feel like I put a lot of thought into a training kind of
Mm,
thing.
I feel like we've been training for for like 8 months. But like, how did you guys deal with it when he's crying? How do you actually not go in there? Like, how do you stay strong and just let him keep going?
It is so hard. So for one, having Bryson as a support to like help us be calm. We both were like, okay, let's just go watch a movie downstairs, and we turn the monitor off. And then every now and again we go listen by the door, but just knowing that he's not going to die, he's not going to hurt himself by crying. It's just crying. The other thing is I kind of did a phasing how long I'd let him cry for. So in the beginning, I'd only let him cry for like 5 minutes. Then after a while, we increased it to 10 minutes. And then 15 minutes. And then sometimes it had gotten as long as like 30 or 40 minutes. But then you notice that after a while, it gets less again. And so next time, if it was 40 minutes this time, the next night, maybe it was only 35 minutes. And the next night it was 20 minutes. And then you can see the improvement with time until eventually he was falling asleep on his own.
So what do you do after? So if you're doing this timed approach, what do you do after 5 minutes? You go in there? Like what?
Yeah, so I would go in there. Our rule was that we were not going to lift him up. We would just like pat his back, because at this point he was flipping over to his stomach to sleep. So even though we laid him on his back, he would automatically flip on his stomach to sleep. So we would just pat his back and shush in his ear with that little S method we talked about earlier. And then once he would calm down a little bit, I would sneak out, like back out in that way. And so, and then maybe if I was backing out, he may cry again, but we let the whole routine start again. But our plan was not to lift him up. So it's the cry it out method. There's another method that's like
the Ferber method.
The Ferber method. I don't quote me on this, but I think that's the method where it's half cry it out, half like you can lift them up and hold them and stuff like that.
Yeah. One of them is lifting them up and holding, and one of them is like you don't go in at all. You'll see them in the morning. Another one
Lord.
Another one is like you go in at the different time increments.
Yeah.
And we tried that. It's so funny now that you were saying that. I remember with Dallas, we did the cry it out, and we actually set timers and everything. We were like, okay, 45 minutes. Like I would be that on it. With Dakota, I feel like I just don't even. I'm not that strict. I'm like, yeah, I just can't. I don't know why I can't do it. I feel like he's my baby. Like I just kind of wing it. I'm like, okay, it's been I think enough time, and
yeah,
and then I just
it's hard though. Yeah. It's hard. And another thing too that we did with Jackson is when he started, the part of the way he started sleeping through the night is my pediatrician was like, if he's still getting up, he's at the age where he doesn't necessarily need to eat at night. So if he wakes up in the middle of the night, you can hold him and do whatever you need to do, but don't feed him, because eventually he'll get the hang of, I'm not going to be eating at this time, and he'll just start sleeping through. So that ended up working for us, at least, for him to stop waking up as much at night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I think that's a big part of it also is with feeding. Again, going back to this whole importance of feeding and sleeping and how it goes hand in hand, because I feel like the reason with Dakota that we weren't as strict with the sleeping is because he stayed home with us until he was 6 months old, and I was nursing exclusively. So I was not sure that he was getting as much food as he needed, because you can't see. Yeah. It's not that I'm doubting that we were feeding him what he needed, but because we couldn't see it in a bottle, I felt like maybe he's crying because he's hungry. So I would go in there and like nurse him overnight, because, with breast milk, it doesn't sit heavier on their stomach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, it's just so many variables when it comes
to so many variables. And, one of my partners from work with her first child, I remember her telling me that they hired a night nurse to come help do the sleep it out method. Wow. There are people there literally, night nurses are there for a lot of great reasons too, but like there are some who specifically help to get your baby to sleep through the night, and they may try the cry it out method or whatever. And so I was telling her how it took us about a week, maybe like 10 days to get Jackson down. And she's like, this night nurse did it in 2 days. I was like, what?
Was she there overnight? Like she's obviously a night nurse.
They just come at night. And they're like, okay, go to bed, parents. We'll take it from here. Probably the best money they've ever spent.
I wish. Yeah, I wish we would have done that.
Oh, my goodness.
Still. When it comes to sleeping, though, even now, we're still trying so much to get Dakota to sleep through the night. And one thing that we've done, which I'm actually wondering, when do we stop doing this, is the dream feed. So the dream feed.
Girl, you're still doing that?
Yes. I don't know when to stop. I just looked it up the other day. I'm like, at what age do you stop the dream feed? And I think we've surpassed that.
You have surpassed it. Let it go. Don't do it tonight.
we didn't, I don't know. I think we're holding on to things, but we are still doing it. Cause the other night I was like, I think we should stop. And then I was like, okay, no, go in there and do it to my husband. But the dream feed is when you give them a bottle, like right around the time that you're maybe about to go to sleep, maybe like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, between 9 and like midnight. You give them this bottle to hold them over until the morning. But the trick to it is that you don't wake them up when you feed them. So you want them to stay asleep and you want to feed them to where they're nice and full and able to sleep until the morning time. And it's called the dream feed. And you know, when I was reflecting on it this week, I was like, you know what, we've been doing the dream feed, but I don't even think it's been effective because he's still waking up throughout the night. So why are we doing this feed?
So do you wake him up to do the dream feed, or he's waking up at that time?
No, we wake him up. We wake him up and we feed him and we put it back down.
I mean, I did dream feeds with the kids too. You should try at this point to not do it and see if he wakes up on his own.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I will. I don't know. I feel like I'm attached to these methods also because I keep thinking like, well, what if I don't have any more kids? What if this is the last baby we'll have and this is our last little moment to do these things, which I think is just the attachment to these routines.
No, that's so true. You know, thinking about all this baby sleep talk makes me think about when they're so little, early newborns, or even up until they start to crawl and move around and roll around more, they just lay in your arms so peacefully. They're not going anywhere. But Russell, now he's 10 months. He's crawling. I feel like he's already squirming to like be on the move. And like, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so different. I miss the days of just holding them all day long. One thing I used to do with Russell, I didn't do it so much with Jackson, but I would wear him in my carrier all day long on my maternity leave. Oh, wow. We would be all around the house. He'd be taking naps in the baby carrier. I'd do the dishes and the laundry, and he slept with a lot of his naps that way. And I just miss that little feeling.
Oh, I never did that. That sounds so sweet.
Yeah, it was really a nice little feeling. Those carriers can be another little trick to, in the beginning, to use for naps and just bonding time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So one thing I'm curious about is with your schedules, because we did talk about how we kind of stick to schedules to get the kids to sleep. Tell me about the sleep schedule and the routine that you might follow to get your kids to sleep.
Yeah, so when they're really in that stage, like after 2 to 3 months, I followed I looked up a bunch of Pinterest things, as you had mentioned before, these little routines, but I was on this whole like sleep, wake, eat, play, sleep again. So I try to stick to no more than like 2 hours for a nap for the most part. And then when they woke up, I'd feed them, both of the kids that way. And then we'd do a little playtime. So when they're really little, it's like tummy time and hands-on time on the floor. As they get older, we do more of that. Now they're crawling, and now Russell's crawling and things like that. But we do some playtime, and then I try to do tummy time or playtime for maybe at least 30 minutes before we went back to sleep again. Mm-hmm. So with time, they start to space their naps out, and there's more awake time. And so even as they're more awake time, I still try not to let naps get more than 2 hours, just to prevent them from getting less sleep or being too much awake at night. Now, my bedtime routines are another thing that I have been really strict about, I suppose, when I think about routines. From both of the kids, I've always been, we eat dinner, whether it be a bottle or real, solids as they start to do solids. Then we kind of do either if it's a bath night, we do a bath. If it's not a bath night, we like wash down and do lotions and oils. I read a book, and then
read a book to Russell.
Mm-hmm. I read a book to Russell, and then I kind of do some time of holding and prayers before they go to sleep.
How sweet.
Yeah.
So precious.
I know it.
No, we pretty much do the same thing as well. I mean, I think we're pretty much on the same page when it comes to routines for sleep and for naps, because we did the same thing as you as far as the naps went when they were here at home before going to daycare. And same thing for bed. And I feel like that helps us. Not only helps the kids, but helps the whole family have a flow in the evenings, like they come home from daycare or a certain time of day. Now it's time, it's time to transition into the nighttime routine, which is that dinner, bath, book, brush, bed, So following that routine with the kids, with both of them, really helps them recognize, okay, it's time to go to sleep now.
Yeah.
And I would say it's not been perfect, especially when there are transitions that are happening or regressions that are happening. We've had some setbacks, especially with Dallas when transitioning from, like, we moved or transitioning into a toddler bed, or just different transitions have caused the routine to falter. But for the most part, like, I swear by that routine, even no matter what, when family's in town, when it's a holiday, even like when the boys have sleepovers, when Jackson and Dallas have sleepovers, we still follow that routine, and they both know, like, okay, time to brush our teeth, time to take a bath. Like, I think it really just helps them having that order, keep them feeling like they're in control also of the night's events.
You just mentioned regressions. Regressions are tough, and I think Russell's going through a regression right now, actually, but that's something that can happen at any stage. But I think a lot of people talk about the 4-month regression. I think that might have to do because babies are rolling over and are just becoming a little bit more mobile at that time. But they say that when baby have leaps in their development, you tend to see a regression in sleep. So right now, Russell's going through one because he just started crawling this week. Yay. But, now he wants to look at everything and see everything and crawl around the crib and try to pull himself up. And so that means that it's harder to get him to sleep than it actually was ever before. So we have been dealing with him waking up or not waking up, but having a harder time falling asleep. And you may hear him on the monitor. So trying to implement that cried out routine that we did a long time ago to kind of remind him, hey, this is what you do to go to sleep. And then sometimes you see the regressions too when they're sick. Like, he's had times just like Jackson, where he's got a stuffy nose and he just can't breathe and he's crying. And sometimes we just have to say, this cried out is not going to work today. We're just going to hold you, and it's going to be one of those days.
Yeah, I totally agree with just those regressions and how their sleep can falter. But I can't really say specifically for us that we experience those regressions based on a certain month. So I always would look at those apps and things and say, 6-month regression, because those things are just so general. Yeah. Whenever I read them, they say, like, okay, your kid should be, they're 8 months, this is the golden time for sleep. And I'm like, no, it's not. So I would say, like, as every mother knows, their kids are all unique and don't follow that pattern. But
exactly,
for the most part, there are going to be regressions, like you said, because of those bursts in development that they may experience a regression. And I think the mother that's like on it will notice, okay, this is a regression. For me, many times I don't even pick up on it. I'm like, what's going on? I'm just frantically like, why is he doing this? And not even connecting the dots. Like, oh, he just learned how to do something else that's really awesome. But that is exciting, though. Like, when they are sleeping, when they are having that regression, I think to remember, oh, wait, they're actually developing a new skill. This is actually pretty exciting that my child is developing and meeting another milestone. Maybe that could be like the silver lining when you can't sleep. It's like, okay, he's crawling now. So he's getting somewhere. All right, guys, it's now time for rapid fire, where we answer questions related to the topic of the day. First question, Renita. What is your number one sleep aid that you just can't live without for your kids?
In the newborn and early infant stage, cannot live without a pacifier.
Oh, yeah, I can see that for sure. And for me, the number one sleep aid I can't live without for my little ones is a noise machine. Love that thing. Works like a charm every time. What is your favorite swaddle brand?
So I really love the Velcro type, especially since I'm doing the double swaddle. I can do the initial stage of the double swaddle, and then with the Swaddle Me Velcros, get that second layer in. So the Swaddle Me is great.
Oh, yeah. I've tried Swaddle Me. It does have, I really like how it wraps around, but my favorite one is Halo, because it wraps, it's even bigger with the wrap part that goes around their arms and their chest. And it also comes in different materials. Like, they have like this wool material for the winter and this lighter material. So I really love Halo.
I didn't discover Halo until I was just about to be finished with using the swaddle. So I almost wish I had used that before. So that's good stuff with that one.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. What is the best trick that you use to get your baby to fall back asleep?
I love the shushing and the shaking methods of the 5 S's. So I have a technique for how I shake, and I'm literally shushing in the ear. Mm-hmm. And then right when they're falling asleep and I start to put them down in the crib, I like slowly back away. So that's my little trick. And I feel like no one knows how to do it how I do it.
Well, for me, the go-to trick to get baby to fall back asleep with Dakota, it's been me just nursing him. He really so much relies on nursing. It is his pacifier. So I have been his sleep aid that works the best to get him to fall back asleep. So nobody can do that like me either. Sorry, husband, but you can't do that. So what is, would you rather lay down your baby to go to sleep when he is asleep, or do you put him down when he's awake?
So once I start their sleep training, like they're no longer sleeping in the room with me, they're in the crib. With sleep training, I try to put them down awake because I feel like once they can learn techniques to get themselves down, it's going to be key. So I would say awake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of the research shows is lay them down while they're awake so that they can get in the habit of self-soothing when they're old enough to. For me, I also try to do awake just for that very same reason. If I can, I've been better at that. Yeah. I've been better than with Dakota. With Dallas, I just put him down however he went down. But yeah, that's good. You're following the best practices on that one. Next question. What do you put your baby to sleep in? So what does he wear to go to sleep?
I love the full-on onesies, like top and bottom pajama sets. So I reserve those for sleep time, and they have to be the zippered kind. I do not like the snaps. So those cute little onesies.
Yes, those are so cute on them. I love seeing a baby in a onesie. They are just so adorable and snuggly looking in those onesies.
Yes.
For me, I usually put them in a top only. So a snap onesie, a long sleeve onesie, not a onesie. What is it called? A onesie, I guess.
But those t-shirt. Yeah, just a onesie. You're right.
Yeah, but there's no legs to it. So I'm very particular about usually no legs. Because our house, the temperature really doesn't regulate well in our house. So I want them to not be too hot. So I always put them in the long sleeve onesie, especially because I'm putting the swaddle on. I'm always so nervous that he's going to get hot. So I just put on the long sleeve onesie with the swaddle with the legs out.
You do not want them to get overheated. It's so important, especially to prevent against SIDS. But in my house, my husband likes to keep it on full Arctic blast. So we need to be in a full on top and bottom, full length outfit.
Next question. When your baby is napping, do you let him nap until he wakes up, or do you wake him up from a nap?
For sure, let him nap. I'm like, if he's sleeping, I have things to do. I want to get my own nap in. So sleep when you can. And then when he wakes up, we'll get down to what we need to do.
For me, I'm the opposite because I'm very strict about the schedule. So after 3 months is when I start to wake them up after the 90-minute mark. I do not want the baby to sleep past 90 minutes. I feel like that's a part of sleep training. So I'm like really by the book. Look, literally on the dot, I will get the baby up. I loosen up as they get older, but in that newborn infant stage, I'm really strict about, I'm going to wake you up after 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite sleep technique for a baby?
So for me, I think routine is key with starting off with after dinner, getting wiped down with a cloth or if it's a bath night, doing a bath, lotions, doing a book, prayer, then sleep. That's my technique.
Mm-hmm. I second that. I love the routine. I feel like it's so clutch once they are old enough, getting them into that routine. It's good not only for the baby, but for the family. It helps us time our night out and keep everyone on that schedule to where once they go down, it's like, all right, time for something else for my husband and I to do. But yeah, that routine and schedule, I think, is one of the best techniques that we've implemented in my family. So what about when you're not at home? What is your favorite sleep technique if you're traveling or if you and your babies are not at home?
So when you're not home, I think that routines are just hard. You're maybe out during bedtime and you're not able to do the things you normally would do. The same space is not the same. So for me, sometimes I let them sleep on me because I'm that constant, whether it's being in my carrier or just me rocking to sleep instead of putting them down awake. I think that I use myself as the technique to get baby down, rocking and just having them in my arms.
Yeah, that's great because you're that constant comfort. You're still there. Even though the environment's different, mom and dad are still there.
Yeah.
For me, it's that sound machine. Like I mentioned earlier, I will make sure whether he's going to Gang Gam's house or we're going out of town somewhere, I always bring the noise machine because I feel like that is a part of that sleep routine at home that will bring him back, take him back to home. It's kind of like he's conditioned when he hears that sound, time to go to sleep. So that's one thing that I always travel with when I'm not at home. And last question, who is better at putting the baby to sleep, you or your partner?
This is interesting because I actually don't know. I think Bryson and I have different techniques to an extent. Like I would say me for sure, because I feel like I've got my rocking and shushing method down. But Bryson, he's got his own way and it works for him. So I would say both.
Yeah, I think for Dakota, Dontrell actually is better than me.
Really?
Yes, he is so patient with Dakota because his sleeping, as I shared earlier, has been a roller coaster. And he will literally sit in that room as long as it takes to get him calm. With me, I literally will nurse him and just put him down. He might cry for 30 minutes and I just kind of walk out. But Dontrell he's just so innovative when it comes to the ways that he puts him down. So I definitely think hands down with Dakota, it's been Dontrell. With Dallas, it was me. So yeah, that's another thing, like with different children, who's the better spouse at doing that. But yeah,
that's true.
That's a good thought there.
Now, one thing about kids' sleep, I think that sometimes it can have an impact on my life when I want to do things. I do not like to mess up their sleep routine, but sometimes people want to go to brunch at noon or do, we might go on a family event together and everyone wants to get together at a certain time. And so I always try to still do things around nap time or try to end things where at least the kids can get in bed, or if we're going to be somewhere, let them start their bedtime routine there. Do you feel like you do the same thing, or you're just kind of like, whatever, we're going to skip this nap today?
We try to, because like I noticed that when they're not getting that sleep, they get really cranky. Like they're noticeably different people when they're not getting that sleep. Like the other weekend we went to Tennessee for this football game at my husband's alma mater, and they were doing so well. But for one, it was a time change from Eastern to Central time. And then we had like the peak excitement, which was the football game right around their nap time. And we were so aware that things were it was falling apart. So we literally had to leave. We just had to run up out of there. As soon as we got in the car, they fell asleep within minutes. And so that just proved to us that, yeah, we're right. Our kids need to be on that sleep schedule, because when they're not, they just start falling apart. So we try to make plans around their sleeping schedule, especially with naps and bedtime, just to avoid the chaos that could ensue if they don't sleep. But if we don't, it's okay, because we know that they might get a little bit extra sleep that night, and then we can sleep in the next morning a little bit. So that's always nice. But we do try to, because I feel like I'm a little torturing them if they don't get the sleep. And because I know how I feel when I don't get sleep. So if it's anything like that, then they need to get that sleep.
That is true. So what are your biggest tips that you have for mothers out there who are going to be having a baby soon or going to be having a new addition? What are some tips that you wish you had when it came to sleep and kids?
I think that you should do some research and prepare, because what helped me is being knowledgeable about different options. And preparing many times for me happened in the moment when they weren't sleeping. It was me looking things up online or finding podcasts to listen to. But that is, to me, it can help just to have options, like a tool chest full of resources that you can pull out in the moment. So like I said, how my husband and I would be reflecting on, okay, that didn't work. Let's try this tomorrow night. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this. It was because we had a lot of ideas of things to do. It's like, okay, well, let's swaddle tonight. Okay, well, tomorrow he got a little less sleep. Let's try making him sleep longer. Okay, he was a little hungry with this bottle. Let's give him a little bit more. So just really trying different things out and listening to your child, because they will show you what's working, just being very aware. And I think that was my biggest takeaway, especially comparing my two children, is that what worked for one won't work for the other. And so I really actually do need to pay attention to them and pick up on the cues and read what they're telling me, those nonverbals, because that will help me identify the next tool to use based on what I'm seeing on what they're doing. Like with Dakota, with me realizing like, okay, wait a minute. I put him in this sleep sack for so long, and he's been showing me that he doesn't want this sleep sack anymore. So finally we took it off, and he's sleeping so much better. I'm like, why didn't I not do this sooner? He obviously was showing me. So yeah, I think just really paying attention to your child and trying different things until you find what works.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I mean, other than the double swaddle, I still advocate for that. But other than that, I think that my biggest tips would be sleep when you can. Try to get your own sleep at different moments. So if that means alternating with your partner or family members who are helping you so that you can be as refreshed as possible, that'd be a tip. And then, I think our family has been really successful with finding routines that help to train the baby. You're right in that every baby's going to be different, but kind of setting routines in the beginning so they can get the hang of, hey, this is what the sleep thing's about, and this is when I should be sleeping. Kind of try different routines until you figure out the right one that's for you. But yeah, that double swaddle, it's pretty good.
If you can figure out how to do it. Well, thank you for listening today to Cradle and All, as we talked all about newborn and infant sleep. Join us next time as we talk all about your mood after baby.
Yes, you guys. Go get some sleep.
Right. Put that baby to sleep and get some sleep.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a thing. And leave us a review. You can also follow us on Instagram at The Cradle and All, or email us at thecradleandall@gmail.com.